nationals stranded abroad. In phase 1 of this massive humanitarian mission, at least 14,800 people would be flown back from 12 countries. The Indian Navy has also dispatched 3 ships to bring back Indian nationals from the Maldives and the UAE. Indian embassies have drawn up a list of compelling cases, and only those nationals are being allowed to pay and use this facility. The highest concentration of stranded Indians is in the Gulf, where more than 3 lakh people are wanting to return home urgently. Our first newsmaker on Global Eye, Indian Ambassador to the United States, Taranjit Singh Sandhu. He spoke exclusively to CNBC-TV18 about plans to bring back Indians stranded in the United States. Ever since the global outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Prime Minister Modi has spoken to US President Donald Trump, and External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar has spoken to US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo 4 times. The envoy said that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought India and the United States closer together. Listen in to this interview. We'd like to begin by asking you, how are you helping stranded Indians in the United States, and how many of them would like to return to India urgently?
See, the numbers in United States are huge. Just to give you an indication, there are about 200,000 students. There are about 125,000 H1B visa holders. There are about 600,000 green card holders. And apart from short-term visitors, which are also big numbers. So right at the start, we got on the instructions of Government of India, we took a very proactive approach. Right from March 11th, we reached out on all platforms, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We established 24/7 helplines. We established what was a unique thing in the US, it's peer support line for students. This is active every day, and almost by 8,000 connections and links, we were able to reach out to almost 70,000. And we have also been in touch with about 265 students. And again, as I mentioned, through all these proactive media links, we were able to get the feel of what the problems they were facing. And similarly, also with the other Indian community members, we found that the kind of assistance they needed, one was, of course, medical, which the community doctors, local authorities were able to help out. Then with accommodation, then temporary accommodations, mostly in the universities was provided, but also Indian American hotel owners, they came forward and they accommodated our people. Of course, food, many of the communities supported through food, and then responding to other emergencies, etc.
Right.
Then lastly, of course, visa-related issues, which we are regularly taking up with the government of the United States.
Ambassador Sandhu, the Indian government has started making a list of stranded Indians, especially the compelling cases. There is a clear criteria laid down for availing the facility to return back to India via Air India flights. How many Indian nationals have signed up for this, and what kind of an evacuation operation, the scale of operation that you're looking at from the United States?
We are following the directives which we have received, which we have mentioned, the special categories. And according to those, we have requested the people who are interested in going back, they have sent us their information, and we are very scientifically, we are dividing it into proportions, and then a list for each station will be prepared. Essentially, since this operation is going to be done by Air India, the places where Air India flies to the United States, that's from where the evacuation will take place. And as you know, that in case of the US, whenever the aircrafts come here, there's a certain mandatory requirement. So our exercise is going to start, basically the first flight will go out on 9th.
You're saying the first flight will go out on the 9th. That is an important piece of information coming from you, Ambassador Sandhu. But would it be possible for you to give an approximate number that would be evacuated, that would be sent back in the first phase?
Look, at this moment, it's too early to give the full numbers. But as of now, we have 7 flights, 1 flight every day coming out from different cities. But this is an evolving situation. as we realize the numbers and as the requirement will be, the Ministry of External Affairs and Government of India will take a call on that.
Right. We also believe that the Ministry of External Affairs, in collaboration with its missions, is creating a database of Indian nationals who would have lost their jobs during this COVID-19 pandemic abroad. In your assessment, how many H1B visa holders, how many Indian nationals would have lost their jobs over the last 2 to 3 months, sir?
I think it's very early to start giving out figures because, as I mentioned to you, this situation is evolving. And actually, the real impact, the real economic impact is still to be known because a lot of our people are in STEM areas, including IT. So, as you know, IT is also picked up during this pandemic because the requirements are huge. So, therefore, at this moment, to give a figure will not be correct. So, we are taking the situation as it comes. And I'm sure post-pandemic, there are lots of other economic outputs which are going to come out, and it would be very early to get to the figures. However, monitoring the situation closely, and we are liaising, of course, with business companies, with our IT companies, as well as government organizations.
Right. There has been very close collaboration between India and United States. The Prime Minister and President have spoken. The External Affairs Minister has spoken at least 3 to 4 times with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Could you tell us about the areas of cooperation between India and United States right now, sir?
As you have correctly pointed out, the Prime Minister has been in touch with the President. PM has been in touch with Secretary of State. The Foreign Secretary has been in touch with Deputy Secretary of State. Of course, at my level, across the administration, we have been in touch. I also must mention to you here that there is a lot of interest in how India is tackling this pandemic. Across the board, I've been speaking to senators, congressmen, think tanks, the business side. People are very interested in knowing how India, through its proactive measures, has been able to keep the death rate so low. So, therefore, there is a lot of exchange taking place, and also especially between our scientific institutions, between NIH, ICMR, between CDC and other institutions. So there is a lot of cooperation going on, and also a potential, especially in diagnostics and therapeutics, and our pharmaceutical companies and medical companies on both sides, they are in touch with each other.
Ambassador Sandhu, are we talking about vaccine development as well? Is there close sharing of information, of R&D? We believe Gilead Sciences is looking for partners abroad, also in India, in other areas in Southeast Asia. Has there been any kind of collaboration, any kind of partnership that is being talked about when it comes to the remdesivir vaccine?
Not just that, but let me again underline here that there has been ongoing partnership and a very close collaboration between the United States and India in the area of medicine. And vaccine development is one such. Let me draw your attention that just about 2 or 3 years back, we had worked together under what is called the Vaccine Action Program. And a particular vaccine was brought out. It's called rotavirus. That actually has taken care of the rotavirus, which was impacting India and many other countries. Similarly, in this area, what you have mentioned, of course, is a vaccine, but it's a curative vaccine. And on that, not only they are hunting, but actually there is already some decisions being made between the private companies and them, and it's almost in the final stages. So certainly, the particular medicine you have mentioned would be available in India, and they are looking to do it very, very soon. Now, as far as the vaccines are concerned, you know that there are certain private companies. Of course, as I mentioned to you that between NIH and ICMR and its institutions, there's already a lot of cooperation going. But also, I do know that Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute, they are in touch with their respective partners, in the United States, and certainly 2 to 3 vaccines in which India is an important partner.
You have been holding a lot of meetings with the US ISPF, the US IBC as well. This is a time when the Indian government is also trying to promote India as an alternate manufacturing destination. Have US companies shown more interest in India, in the Indian market, setting up manufacturing in India over the last 3 months?
See, India is an attractive destination, and many studies have come out which are also indicating that in post-COVID scenario, India would be one of major drivers of the world economy. So, obviously, there is a lot of interest in India, and right now, as you have mentioned, I have had been in close touch with a lot of American companies, including India-US Business Forum and US ISPF and US IBC and such other chambers, and they have all shown a lot of interest in investing in India, in FDI investments, and I'm sure this will go ahead because you must remember that in this entire crisis, one thing which we have come out very clearly, that we are reliable global supply partners. And you have seen in the supply of medicines where we were part of the supply chain, India has been very forthcoming. And this aspect, particularly in the United States, is very much in mind of most of the companies as well as public at large.
Right. Talking about the H1B Visa Program, sir, the US President has called for a review of non-immigrant visas as well. Do you think we will have to be prepared for a curtailment of the H1B Visa Program? Because it seems that for the US government, the priority is to hire American workers right now.
Look, as I mentioned to you earlier, that it's too early to comment on that. However, do keep in mind that most of our students here and most of our experts are, as I said, in the area of STEM and IT. And IT is already getting a big boost at this particular moment. So, since most of our H1Bs and green card holders bring value to the United States, so in general terms, I don't think there should be that much of fear, because since you bring in value, most of the companies would like to keep you. However, certainly there is going to be an economic impact all around the world, not just in the United States, in other places too. But as we just spoke, that this is also not only a challenge, but a huge opportunity for India. And in the long term, when we see it after 5 or 6 years, we will see that many of our people, because of their own inherent talents, would be accommodated.
With the kind of stand that the US has taken on China, do you believe that US and India would come closer together as a result of this crisis, Ambassador Sandhu?
I don't think, irrespective of whatever happens on the China front, India-United States partnership has definitely got even more strengthened during this crisis, because, as I mentioned to you, that the way we have acted responsibly on being part of the supply chain, there is a lot of sense here that India is a reliable partner. And that, I'm sure, will influence when many of these companies take their decisions.
On that note, we take a short break, but on the other side, we look at Sweden's no-lockdown strategy in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. Sweden's ambassador to India, Claes Molin, joins us for an exclusive conversation. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching The Global Eye. The World Health Organization recently praised Sweden's strategy in fighting COVID-19. While much of Europe has remained under lockdown, Sweden has kept its schools and businesses open. The country is relying on self-regulation, urging citizens to maintain social distancing and take personal responsibility. The country has reported more than 25,000 cases and over 3,000 deaths, but the Swedish government believes that this strategy has allowed the country to keep the economy moving without overwhelming its health system. I caught up with Sweden's envoy to India, Claes Molin, about Sweden's unique approach in fighting this pandemic. Listen in. How is Sweden managing to control the spread of the pandemic without a lockdown, without overwhelming its health system?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. I think we're managing as well as we possibly can. I think we're all more or less in the same boat. Some of our measures have stood out a little bit in comparison to others, mainly because of the perceived and real voluntary nature of some of the measures that the government mainly has recommended rather than pronounced by decree. I think another facet of Sweden's approach is very much building on the tradition that we have of public trust, mutual responsibility between citizens and the government agencies. It's also one of trying to adjust measures in light of developments so as not to flood, so to speak, the arena with too many harsh recommendations and measures at the beginning, but rather trying to be nimble and instituting these measures as developments occur and as the government and its agencies monitor the situation.
Right.
Having said that, obviously we are concerned about the certainly the death rate is concerning for us as well as for many others. I think another salient feature, another salient recommendation has been to try to safeguard the healthcare system so that it's not overwhelmed.
Right.
That measure has gone very well. I'll stop there.
But Ambassador, do you think the model is really working, considering Sweden has seen almost more than 24,000 cases and over 3,000 deaths?
Well, it's, I think, something that we will all come back to, what is working and when it is working. I think it is far too early, and this is also something that has been repeated constantly, that the proof will be in that final pudding. Once we look back months, perhaps years from now, which proved to be the most effective strategy and combination of strategies. Obviously, as I said already, it's highly concerning that the death rate is relatively high. It's certainly higher than our neighboring countries, which are similar in many ways. They're smaller, but they are similar in many ways, and they have adopted somewhat different strategies. But we will have to see, and we will have to compare. We also, as is, I think, well known by now, countries do keep statistics in slightly varying ways. There is some discrepancy there in reporting, etc. But I think on the whole, the government is keeping to its strategy of mutual responsibility, of trust in institutions, in government, and certainly in the healthcare and first responders of our society.
But is the Swedish government reviewing its strategy, its no-lockdown strategy, or does it believe herd immunity is the only way forward, self-regulation is the only way forward, because this is a virus that we will have to coexist with?
Yes, I don't think I said Sweden believes in herd immunity per se. Those are your words. I think what my understanding is ours, as well as many other governments, and listening to the experts, until and unless there is a vaccine, which will hopefully come sooner rather than later, and which will then accomplish what the slowdown and eventual going away of the virus and the disease, at least in communicable ways, you need to attain a level of people who have been exposed and who have antibodies. Where that lies is somewhat debated, but it seems to be 60 to 70% of society. Some call it consciously attaining herd immunity. That is not the stated goal of the Swedish government, but rather going, as I said earlier, going along, also using strategies at different times, also adapting to new information about the virus, and also how the citizenry and how the country is adapting to it, and then introducing gradually some new measures, as well as perhaps letting go or letting up of others.
Right. A lot has been talked about herd immunity around the world. What is the Swedish government's own view on this?
Well, as I said, it's not the stated goal at all. It's been discussed, and many people have become instant experts in some of these issues. Naturally, it's the topic of discussion everywhere these days. I think what the government's stated goals have been to attain a sustainable situation over time, introducing recommendations early on, sharpening some, easing some others as we've gone along, maintaining, you're familiar, of course, with the expression of flattening the curve, so as not to overwhelm a healthcare system which is universal in Sweden. Everyone has access to healthcare, not overwhelming it, maintaining a certain buffer that has been maintained. The intensive care units in Sweden in its 20 plus regions have had more than a 20% margin of free care, free places in hospitals, etc.
Right.
So as not to overwhelm that system, as well as keeping the healthcare for other first responders in their jobs, which is why, for instance, take one example, Sweden has not closed preschool or schools up through 9th grade in order to have parents who have key jobs in healthcare, police, fire departments, etc. On the job.
Right. Tell us about how Sweden is trying to minimize the economic impact. Tell us what is open in Sweden and what is not during this crisis.
Well, much has remained open, albeit at a slightly lower degree, including restaurants, cafes, etc., but with very clear and strict social distancing rules and regulations. I think the overarching goal, of course, an overarching ambition is the health and well-being of all the citizens. The economy is naturally over time also important. Sweden is a country which is tremendously dependent on exports. Roughly half of our GDP comes from the export sector. So maintaining, having those wheels turn, even if they're turning slowly, and being able to have people return to work where they haven't been able to go to work has been important. The government has presented, I think, 6 or 7 economic packages of stimulus packages of different types, both protecting workers, giving unemployment insurance, making those benefits more tenable over time, sustainable. Also allowing credit flows, guaranteeing loans to small and medium-sized businesses, also to large corporations, looking at sectors which are critical over time in infrastructure, communications, etc. And portioning out this kind of support over some time.
How does India fare when it comes to other Southeast Asian markets, when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to doing businesses? If there are certain areas, certain reforms that the Indian government should be undertaking, what could those be?
Well, I think we've been very encouraged by the ease of doing business measures, if you will, that have been undertaken under the current government in the last few years in both the first and the second Modi governments. We have well over 200, some 225, I think, Swedish companies active, invested in India today. I've just come off a webinar with them, a weekly webinar that we have today with the secretary at the Ministry of Commerce, Dr. Mohapatra, where the government is very keen to see what it can do, and with us and with others, the European Business Group, etc., to stay very active and also forward-looking when it comes to our needs. And that is happening both at the center level, at the national level, as well as in many of India's great states. And so I'm very encouraged by that spirit, and a very constructive spirit. We've seen on a number of
Right.
fronts, also investment facilitation mechanisms that we have through our bilateral cooperation, where I, with our Chamber of Commerce and a number of companies, meet with the Ministry of Commerce, the DPIIT, both at the center, but also with many of the states where we are invested. So
Right.
I think India is very well placed to increase its attractiveness. And perhaps also, if I may, take a good step forward when it comes to starting a real free trade agreement discussion with the European Union, of which Sweden is a part.
Ambassador, my last question. When it comes to markets in Southeast Asia, which would be some of the preferred economies, preferred destinations for manufacturing for Swedish companies? Because that would give India a sense about where the competition lies.
I think, again, it's a huge question. We have many companies in every thinkable sector already invested in and looking at Asia, and South and Southeast Asia. I would actually like to highlight the bilateral cooperation that we have with India and the tremendous growth in investments, also in cooperation on innovation. Our prime ministers have met both in Sweden and here in India. We've had a number of delegations and members of our respective national governments bring business and other delegations to their respective partners. And I think not least when it comes to technology, obviously, communications, when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry, power, transmission, smart cities, areas for the future, where also on a people-to-people basis, we see fantastic growth in the interest both of Indian nationals moving to Sweden, working in Sweden, studying in Sweden, and also a great influx of Swedes traveling to India. And I'm looking now, obviously not for the last statistics over the last few months, which have been exceptional and without parallel. I'm talking about the overall trend for the last 5-10 years. And I just see that continuing as India develops and also sharpens its tools, so to speak, becomes more and more competitive and more interested in participating in an open way.
So that was the Swedish ambassador to India saying he's very optimistic about India's role in global supply chains. He also spoke about Sweden's unique model in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Many thanks for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18.